Daern. Chapter 1. The Edge of the World. Part 2. Revo. Revo's eyes rose higher and higher as he looked up the nearly sheer face of the stone monolith. It was nearly perfectly smooth, polished by ages of rain and snow until its surface had developed a faint sheen. It was this patina that gave the rock its unique beauty. In the right light, it almost seemed to glow.
Bigger up close, ain't it?
Revo nearly jumped out of his fur at the unexpected voice. He spun around, the shaggy mane that ran along the back of his neck, standing on end. His bushy tail puffed up, and his claws dug into the stones beneath him, forelimbs spread wide for stability. His lips began to pull back from his sharp teeth before he realized the speaker was just Albert, the headman of Stone's Cradle. The old man took a reflexive step backward, and half raised his hands in a gesture of supplication.
Sorry, didn't mean to startle you there.
No, it's okay. I should be the one apologizing, Revo replied, feeling foolish. He wasn't normally so jumpy, but being out on his own, truly away from his clan for the first time, had been a bit more nerve-wracking than he'd expected. He flattened his dark fur and tried to relax his tense muscles, taking slow breaths into his deep chest. So, this is where the festival will be? Albert seemed to be over the whole incident, already turning away and fumbling with some keys on his belt.
Well, festival's probably too strong a word. But yeah, this is the place.
The young Velos had already been in Stone's Cradle 3 days, but for some reason the boulder and its eastern counterpart still fascinated him. He was particularly interested in a feature on the western stone. Set directly into the solid face of the boulder was a door. It was built of rough pine timbers and reinforced with unadorned iron fittings and hinges. Before the door, a wide semicircle had been left empty. The house is built around the space. The entire area was cobbled with worn and crumbling stones to make a kind of courtyard. Albert held a few keys up to the light. Finally, he nodded to himself and approached the door.
Celebration will be starting soon. Best get everything in order. Want to help?
Revo peered eagerly around Albert as the old man forced the key into a lock and pulled the doors open with a long, reluctant creak of wood. He took a deep breath, sighing with pleasure as his snout was filled with the sharp, sweet smell that wafted out from the space beyond. Stacks of Juma barrels, lying on their sides in wooden racks, filled the cave from floor to ceiling. According to Albert, the fiery liquor called Juma was the small village's one and only claim to fame, its location between 2 enormous boulders notwithstanding. The beverage was also the reason Revo had chosen to linger in Stone's Cradle, not just to drink it, though that was certainly part of it, but because of the celebration that went with it. Revo followed Albert inside, looking with interest around the rectangular room. It was obviously not a natural cave. In addition to its shape, the walls were perfectly smooth, as though they had been polished. "Did you carve all this out?" Revo asked, eyes widening at the sight around him. There was nothing else in Stone's Cradle that was quite like it. All the homes were built of rough-cut stone and pine.
"Nah,"
answered Albert distractedly as he inspected the brand burned into the lid of the closest barrel.
"This place has been here long before my granddad's time. He always figured it was hollowed out by knife ears. In either case, it makes for a pretty good cellar. Always stays cool, you see."
"Knife ears?" Revo asked, confused.
"Elves, lad, elves," Albert growled. "You know what those are, right?"
Everyone knows what elves are. Elves seem to be in every dark story his older littermate had ever told him. "Yes, I'm familiar," Revo muttered quietly, as he followed Albert towards the very back of the cellar. Here, all the barrels were covered with dust, and Albert had to squint to make out the brands in the weak light.
"Here we are."
Albert happily patted the side of a barrel branded as 1640.
"This one's been aging about 4 years now. Should be ready."
Together they rocked the barrel back and forth, easing it out of its rack until it lay wobbling on the ground. Albert wiped his brow and rubbed his shoulders.
"Must be getting old. Think you could,"
he said, gesturing at the barrel. Revo stood up on his back legs and rested his forelimbs over it, then began to roll it out of the cellar. It was harder than it looked. The barrel was heavy and its contents kept sloshing back and forth inside. Between his claws that dug into the wood slightly, and his widely spaced thumb that could turn until it was nearly opposite his fingers, though, he managed to get it out into the cobbled courtyard.
"Thanks," said Albert. "Well, you'll be seeing the ceremony soon enough now. It's always a good time. Glad you were able to stay for it."
Revo nodded and panted for a moment before replying. "Me, too. And, thanks again for inviting me. I wasn't in any particular hurry." Having rested a little, Albert helped him roll the barrel onto its end, the old man's knees cracking ominously.
"Sure. Not often we see you, Velos." Albert fanned his face with his battered hat. "Remind me again where you was heading?"
"River's Crossing."
"Seems an awful long way to go, all alone," Albert noted offhandedly. "But what do I know? You got your own business, even if it don't make much sense to me."
Revo didn't respond immediately, not because he didn't want to, but because he was trying to find the right words for it. He tried to explain himself properly a few times, with mixed results. There just wasn't an equivalent ritual in human society. To buy himself some time to think, he turned and began to nose around a pile of rocks near the base of the door. As he flipped them over, he landed upon an explanation he thought would make sense. "Have you ever gone hunting?" Revo asked.
"Sure,"
Albert said, his eyes scanning the alleyways between the houses expectantly. "Well, that is what I'm doing. I'm hunting. Only instead of bringing back food for my clan, I'm bringing back knowledge. And the River's Crossing Void Temple is supposed to have a huge library. See?" Revo looked at Albert hopefully. The old man just glanced at him for a second with the same incredulous expression before turning back to the houses.
"Yeah, sure."
Revo sighed and flipped over another one of the rocks near the door, and was surprised to find that the fragment was intricately carved. Though broken and worn, he thought it might have been the sun or maybe a star. He was about to ask Albert where it had come from, but was interrupted by the arrival of more people. 3 men were lugging a kitchen table into the courtyard. They dropped it with a heavy thunk and paused to rub their aching lower backs. There was to be no rest for them, however, as their mates arrived soon after. Wives. The word is wives.
"Looks like it's time,"
Albert exclaimed, rubbing his hands together eagerly. He immediately excused himself. Revo grinned. The old man was already waving his arms energetically and bellowing orders at the new arrivals. Tonight, the good people of Stone's Cradle were celebrating the first drink. From what Albert had explained, he gathered that it was some sort of pre-harvest celebration. Honestly, he found the whole concept of celebrating before the harvest nearly as confusing as Albert found his own quest. But he was here to learn, and he wouldn't be doing himself any favors by arguing over every strange thing the humans did. Turning his attention away from the headman, Revo watched as the open space before the Jumas cellar quickly filled with people. Scrubbed kitchen tables were now appearing left and right, manhandled out of narrow front doors. The mismatched heights and sizes of the tables were quickly hidden beneath equally dissimilar tablecloths. As each table was placed, a small army of women and girls descended upon it. In a maelstrom of clattering dishes and flying utensils, the women would set the table and then move on to the next one. The beginnings of 3 massive cook fires were coaxed to life. In no time at all, meat was roasting, the fat dripping into the fire with sharp cracking and popping sounds. Revo settled himself at the end of a table where he could watch the goings-on without getting in the way of preparations. He grumbled as he tried to find a comfortable way to sit on the bench that didn't involve sitting on his own bushy tail. As the cooking neared completion, people started settling down to the tables all around him. Revo watched, already salivating, as the 3 hogs were taken off the spits, their skins crisped to golden perfection. They lined them up snout to tail on a long table, and the butcher sharpened his knife in preparation of carving the meat. Revo started to get up, his plate in hand, but no one else moved. A little girl seated across from him gave him a funny look, and he sat himself back down. The child turned away, and he noticed for the first time that everyone was looking towards the barrel that he had helped bring out. Feeling silly, Revo stared at it too. After several minutes of waiting, Albert finally approached the barrel, a crowbar tucked under his arm. With practiced ease, he popped the lid off, which clattered onto the ancient cobbles. With a great flourish, he dipped a small glass tumbler into the barrel. He held it up to the crowd. The liquid inside was a pure, rich gold. The smell from the open barrel intensified as Revo sniffed the air. "Welcome, citizens of Stone's Cradle," intoned Albert solemnly, still clutching the glass. "We gather here this evening to celebrate the first drink. It's been—" Albert was cut off mid-sentence as the assembled crowd began banging mugs on the tables and letting out a short burst of cheering. Revo flattened his ears against the unexpected noise. "Sure are a raucous bunch." Albert looked slightly put off, but he waited for the cheering to subside and cleared his throat. I can see we're all excited. Well, yes, good reason to be, I suppose. 'Cause, as I was saying, it's been a good year. Crops are coming along fine, and they be looking like the weather should hold right and finely for the harvest. Another round of cheering went through the crowd. Albert weathered this one with a smile. When they were starting to get quiet again, he raised the glass of Juma high. The last few mug-bangers in the crowd went instantly silent, and Revo saw the faces around him grow serious. "Guarding Hunter," Albert said, voice growing a bit stronger and echoing off the granite monolith behind him. "Please accept this offering in gratitude for your good blessings this year, and may we continue to live up to your teachings of honest work and dedication to our families. We ask that you watch out for our safety in the coming harvest and bless us humble folk with good fortune." Albert then turned the shot of Juma and let the liquor spill out onto the ground. Albert and all the assembled crowd bowed their heads and stayed silent for a few moments. Revo bowed his head as well. They pray to the guarding hunter too. That's one thing we have in common, even if our manner of worship is quite different. In the quiet reflection, he thought about his home and the journey that was ahead of him. "Guarding hunter, may your wisdom and courage guide me to success." "Right then," Albert called out. "Come and get it." With a last rousing cheer and much scraping of benches, the town stood as one. With tumblers and tankards in hand, they rushed the open barrel. Albert had just enough time to fill his own glass before he was promptly pushed aside by the excited mob. As good as the Juma smelled, Revo's first allegiance was to the 100 pounds of pork sitting to his right. Only after his plate was heaped high with ham and stewed greens did he attempt to approach the barrel. In just a few minutes it was already half empty. He filled his own glass, teetering slightly on his hind legs, and carried the whole lot back to his place. The meat was delicious. I'd never thought to use that herb for seasoning. The Juma had a nice bite to it, starting off kind of bitter, then getting a nice sweetness as he rolled it around his tongue. Wow, Revo felt a bit guilty. The stuff his aunts usually cooked up couldn't hold a candle to the Juma. Distracted by the food and drink, he hardly noticed a group of young men take places beside him. They looked pretty much like nearly everyone else in Stone's Cradle, strong and burly with dark hair and dark eyes, all except one, who was by contrast tall and slender with flaxen hair and a wide, easy smile. He seemed to be enjoying the other people's attention as much as he was enjoying the food and drink. "You're really from River's Crossing? How in the bloody mist did you end up here?" one of the locals asked, with open astonishment. You would have thought the stranger had said he'd traveled from one of the 7 moons. Revo turned and stared at the group of men with sudden curiosity, swallowing a chunk of ham whole. "Desperate times call for desperate measures, my friends. Believe me, River's Crossing isn't what it used to be. No work for honest men," the man said, gesturing forcefully with his fork. Revo scooted a bit closer to the group. Hey, he felt a bit awkward cutting in on their conversation like this, but curiosity had gotten the better of him. "I just heard you talking about River's Crossing. Do you know if the River's Crossing Void Temple Library is still in good shape?" The blond man stabbed the fork into a slice of ham. "Yeah, probably. Never been there myself. Wouldn't really fancy being stuck underground with a bunch of Enneto eavesdropping on your every thought." So they really can see inside of other people's minds? Revo asked eagerly, disregarding the stranger's less than enthusiastic endorsement. One of the locals piped up this time.
Peter here's just being paranoid. We got our own monastery out that way.
He waved vaguely northward.
They can't just do it without you noticing. And without your permission, it's against the law.
You have any Edo here? Revo exclaimed. Before anyone had a chance to reply, however, Peter spoke up again. Anyway, I was coming up here looking for work. Think I'll be able to find some with the harvest going on?
Oh, sure. Half the village will be working the harvest next couple of weeks. Farmers always looking for more hands, replied another local.
Revo went back to his food as the conversation rambled off into farm talk. His mind was ablaze. There are any Edo nearby. Maybe I don't have to go all the way down to River's Crossing. I wonder how far away this monastery is. Where'd Albert get off to? Revo looked around the crowd. Albert was up near the open Juma barrel, enjoying his dinner with some of the other village elders. Revo took a deep breath. There's still plenty of time tomorrow to ask him about it. What is it Anya always told me? Don't waste all your energy chasing your own tail. Best to just enjoy the night. He got up to get a second helping, and enjoy the night he did. Thanks for listening to Daern, a story in progress. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like. And if you really enjoyed it, consider donating through Patreon. Any amount will go a long way towards helping us bring more content to you. Links to our Patreon and our website are in the description. See you next week, and have a good one.